I've been talking about for the length of the show, of course. Looking forward to talking to you, but I've really wanted you to be a part of this mix for so very long. I mean, downwithtyranny.com, where you publish great takes on politics and what's going on in the world, is just one thing you've done. I mean, your history and also your tie to the Bay Area. A lot of our audience comes out of the Bay Area. I spent some of the greatest years of my life in the Bay Area, as did you. You were, Howie, and I'll get to the politics because I've also promised that you just know so much in this world of politics, and I have specific questions I'd love for you to weigh in on. But your world in the Bay Area, I feel like, was really about music primarily, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. I mean, I would understand why people would think that, but it was always tied in with politics as
With
well. In
politics.
fact,
Okay.
they asked me to do a blurb for a book that's coming out soon called Wanna Beat. So Wanna Beat, I'm thinking, why do they want a blurb from me? And then I started reading it, and it could have been about me. I mean, this kid is living in San Francisco. He winds up going to concerts that I put on, like at the Mabuhay Gardens, for example. He went to the Miners Benefit concert. That was my idea. But you should know that one of the ways I got involved with the music scene in San Francisco was by visiting Harvey Milk, who was his place was right next door to a record store called Aquarius Records, and that led to me becoming a DJ and promoting punk rock music, etc. So it was all kind of tied in together.
I really didn't know that. That's awesome. Yeah. And then
I can tell you something that you might not know and that's not in Wikipedia.
Yeah. Howie, you ran Warner Brothers Records?
No, I ran Reprise, which was half of Warner Brothers. I was the president of Reprise, and it was the sort of cooler half of Warner's.
Well, you did have all the cool artists. I mean, you had that whole world of
Green Day.
Yeah, I mean, is that Green Day?
For example, Depeche Mode is another good example.
Wow.
Yeah, we had a lot of cool artists. Of course, Warner's had cool artists too. And before that, I was the general manager of Sire Records, which had the Talking Heads and the Pretenders and the Ramones, etc. It was mostly, although we had Madonna, it was mostly a punk rock label or alternative music label.
That's just wild. I will get kind of into the real political side here in a second, but I have a question about.
Oh, guys, I'm happy to talk about music day and night. Okay, so whatever you want to do, it's fine with me.
How did you meet Lou Reed?
So interesting question because there's a lot of layers there. When I was just a kid, I wound up going to every single Velvet Underground show at the Exploding Plastic Inevitable that Andy Warhol put on St. Mark's Place. I went to every time that they played. I went there. So Lou was kind of a hero to me. But I never booked them to play my school. I was the chairman of the student activities board at my college out on Long Island, Stony Brook. But I would always meet people there, other artists, usually aspiring artists. I would meet them and invite them to come play in Stony Brook. Like, for example, Jackson Browne, who wasn't known, Tim Buckley, who wasn't known. So great people, but who didn't have records yet. And that was one of the reasons why I went. But I also went. Am I allowed to talk about heroin on this show?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so he had a song called Heroin. I had been addicted to heroin a couple of times in my life before then, and I still, one time before then, one time after them, I still kind of liked it. And that song that the Velvet Underground did, that Lou wrote, called Heroin, attracted me in a very, very big way. So when Lou lost his record label many, many years later, decades later, I was so excited that my boss at Sire, Seymour Stein, wanted to, think about signing Lou. So I encouraged him very much. He said, no one can stand him. He's really, really difficult. If we do this, you're going to have to take care of this and leave me out of it. And I said, absolutely, that would be the best thing that could ever happen. So Lou and I became very, very close. And we had a little team around Lou. It wasn't just me. There were other people as well, like Bill Bentley, for example. But there were a whole bunch of people who became the Lou Reed team. And, the first record that Lou did for us, boom, biggest hit he had in decades, with Dirty Boulevard from the New York album.
And did you pick that? I mean, how do you decide what record to release? What track to release from?
Excellent question, and I'm really glad you asked me because in usually the corporate masters make that decision. So it'll be the record label will say, "This is what we have coming out." The reason that Reprise was such a great label is because it had been started by Frank Sinatra as a sanctuary for artists. I took that very seriously, and the reason why we were such a great label was because in the end, the artist always got to pick the single. So if an artist would say, I want this song, and our promotion guys would say, no, that's never going to get on the radio. I want this song. I would say, convince the artist that, that your position is right. But in the end, it was the final decision was always made by the artist. No matter what the promotion guy said, no matter what the any marketing people said, it always was up to the artist. So I was very, very proud of that. I did it for the whole time that I worked at Warner Brothers, and I never wavered from that decision. I always felt it was the best way to go. There were no other labels doing that, by the way.
The 30,000-foot view of music involves, I suppose, among a bunch of other stuff, these trends in music. Like you were involved in this incredible movement with punk rock. I mean, it was a much different sound and a subculture. There was then hip hop and rap, etc. I'm wondering if you can maybe speak to that phenomenon and where it is now, because it feels as though we're more siloed in our listening now than ever before.
Yeah, it's a tough one for me because I'm not really, conversant with what's going on now in music. People send me tapes sometimes, I listen to them, but I'm busy with my politics now, and I do that all day rather than listen to new music. I haven't turned on a music radio station in I don't know how many years, many years. But what you're getting at about the siloing is absolutely the case, and it's interesting because when I was growing up, everyone seemed in New York City, everyone seemed to listen to the same couple of radio stations, so everybody was aware of the same music, and it started spreading out. And in some ways, it was a good thing. I mean, bring it over to television, and it was the same thing. I think there were like 5 stations when I was a kid, 5 TV stations, as opposed to 5,000 now. And so everyone, if you talked about who the guest was on the Ed Sullivan Show, no matter who you talked to, everyone saw that. Everyone knew. Everyone was watching the same few shows, and that sort of like it was kind of bound the culture together in a certain sense. And it's very, very different now, and both on radio and on television and in music itself. So yes, the punk rock movement that you brought up and the alternative music movement, it had a big impact in terms of influence, but it really, really wasn't gigantic. In other words, it wasn't like the Beatles selling millions and millions and millions of records. It was a very, very kind of different phenomena. People used to talk about the Ramones as being one of the biggest bands in the world. Well, they did have a gigantic impact on the music world, but they never really sold very many records. They were they were very frustrated about that because they were angry. In fact, Johnny was very angry that they got all this press. They got lots and lots of influential people like them. Other bands cited them all the time as their biggest influence, and yet they didn't have a lot of money, to put it very mildly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Johnny had more than most of them, but no, they didn't really have a lot of money. He was a good investor.
The darling of of the culture, the subculture. But then, but you don't have the lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, none of them really, almost none of them really broke through in a very big way in terms of being commercial. I mean, the Talking Heads did a little bit, the Pretenders did a little bit. Every now and then there would be someone who did. At one point I went over to England. And it's kind of a long story, but I was spending time with the Clash. I went on tour with them, and then when we got back to London, they introduced me to some of their friends, and one of them was Billy Idol. who was in this band called Generation X at the time, and I got to know him and the guitar player Tony James really well, and I loved Generation X. I thought they were great, but again, they weren't having any kind of commercial success. And at some point, Billy Idol said, "Hey, the hell with that," and he left the band and became a solo artist right in the middle of the release of an album. And he just took the big commercial song from that album, made it his own song, and became like a big pop singer, and became also wealthy because of that.
Sure. Wow. The yeah, so that was in that particular instance, he had the instinct that, hey, look, it was his instinct that made him do that. Yes?
I believe it was his instinct. I mean,
Yeah.
at one point, this was kind of funny. I was just, this kid in San Francisco. I often didn't have money for gas, but A&M Records was afraid of Billy Idol. He was there. They signed him, and he was coming over to the Bay Area to do promotion, and they didn't know what to do with him, and they were literally afraid that he would like bite somebody or do something horrible. And they asked me if I would take him around to the radio stations in the Bay Area and sort of be his person for the day. I was just a guy. I didn't have any affiliation with A&M Records, but they were frightened. It was kind of a similar thing at the same time where Warner Brothers Records was afraid of Devo, and they knew that I had a relationship with Devo. So they actually flew me down from San Francisco, where I live, to LA to introduce them to Devo. When Devo, their new artist, came to town to meet everybody, they thought, well, maybe if Howie's there, he could keep them from spitting at us or something. It was weird. But anyway, in terms of Billy, I kind of got to know him pretty well, first over in England, and then later when we spent a full day together driving from San Jose to San Francisco and Marin to one radio station after another. And I got the idea that it had been him who thought of it. I kind of felt badly because Tony James, the guitar player in the band, was kind of the one who I was really the most friendly with in that group. So I had a little bit of tiny angst about the breakup of Generation X, a band I loved, and Billy going in a much more commercial direction, which is what he did and what he wanted to do. I mean, my opinion, it's just my opinion, he may have a different opinion, was that he really wanted to be successful and he wanted to be rich. And that opinion is somewhat informed by other artists who had the same feeling. They wanted to make it. They
Sure.
didn't just want to be cool and hip and be in magazines and be, they really wanted to be big. I mean, I remember, again, going back to Johnny Ramone, him, telling me one time, that he didn't want to be like a foreign film that everybody thought was so cool. He wanted to be like a big Oscar-winning film. That was the picture of the year. He didn't want the Ramones to be underground.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, actually. That's a great parallel. He was sharp that way, Hey, it's...
Yeah, he was very, very smart guy.
Terrific to have all the
He was
plaudits,
a Republican, but he was a very smart guy.
Right?
Anyway.
So let me get you to some politics here. Again, hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.